Hi, so I'm Stacey Hoke. You probably know that already if you're here. And my work primarily has to do with codependency and the effects of codependency and being an empath. And today I was at a veterans event and I spoke, and a man came up to me afterwards, and he's a 75-year-old man, and said, "I will forever be indebted to you because I've never thought about what you just said." So, and it's really funny because I actually went into the bathroom after I had spoke, and I was like, oh my God, am I out of place? Am I out of line? And he said, "Please share everything that you've shared." And I have theoretically done it, but it's easier for me as a writer to kind of hide behind my words. And that was in Imperfectly Sane. So I'm going to plug my book right here. I've actually never plugged my book before, but here's my book called Imperfectly Sane. And the reason it's called Imperfectly Sane is because of the ramifications of not just narcissism and codependency and being an empath in a world that is non-empathic. The root of that starts with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I am someone who prides myself in speaking for the voiceless, right? And the problem with being voiceless, having PTSD, is that you don't actually know why you're silenced, who's silencing you, what's silencing you, and you feel like there's something wrong with you. So the root of my work, first and foremost, is the fragmentation that happens when somebody experiences trauma. And then what happens is, we know that I'm a student and teacher of epigenetics, which means that actually it's possible for nurture to change nature. So your DNA sequence is a light body that is configured, I should say, in such a way that certain genes are expressed and certain ones are not, and certain environmental effects can happen that trigger on genes that aren't supposed to be on and trigger off genes that are supposed to be on. So if you are raised, first of all, actually it goes like this. If you're born to somebody who has PTSD, you're 30 times more likely to be an infant that displays the biological symptoms of somebody with PTSD. So right there is the birth of empathy, okay? Because you're coming into the planet and you're hypervigilant, you're mistrusting, your nervous system is going haywire trying to figure out how to be in a body because it's scary to be in a body, right? So we know that we have the same stress hormones. Old infants have the same stress hormones as their parents did if their parents had PTSD. Okay, so there's a biological component to this. This isn't just some fluffy stuff. And then eventually, what happens, the saddest part, is that most people with PTSD won't admit it. And most people with PTSD think that we should get over it. And we come from these very, just suck it up, you pussy. It wasn't that bad. You don't even really know what it's like discrediting all of your experience, right? So we're raised in families that negate their own PTSD. And therapy is for quacks, and, self-help is for people that can't handle life. So you have the biological component of a nervous system that's freaking out, and then you have somebody telling you there's no reason to freak out, invalidating your experience, and on top of that, though they're there, they're not here. So the same paradigm of being somebody with PTSD, which is I'm apathetic, I'm numb, I'm hypervigilant, I am angry, I am isolated constantly, nobody understands me, the isolation that comes from that, the let me out, the I'm hiding, but I don't even know what I'm hiding, and I'm hiding because I'm scared, but I don't know what I'm scared of, and we can say, sure, somebody in combat, or somebody who has come out of incest abuse, or somebody who has come out of a cult, or somebody who, and it's people like us who know that we're raised with the ramifications of what those people deal with then, because they don't heal themselves. So then, on top of the biological implication, we're being raised like generations before us, just bleeding trauma through generations in that isolated manner, that just get over it. I got over it. That happened years ago. Or, why are you so sensitive? Why are you so sensitive? So we feel crazy, right? And as a child, especially as an only child, I feel I always wanted siblings that were close in age to me, because I wanted somebody to go like, you're not crazy. Like, I saw that too, because the way that PTSD presents is actually extreme narcissism. And that's not in the technical sense. It can definitely show up in the technical sense, because all of these things are adaptations and fragmentations of consciousness itself. But when you're a child going, you're supposed to be caretaking me, but somehow I'm caretaking myself and I feel obligated to caretake you, that turns into codependency, because we're like, but just get in here. If I was lovable enough, you would get in here with me. And the parent's just like, I ain't getting in there with you. I don't know intimacy like that. I don't have anything. There's nothing to plug into. There's literally no thing to connect to. So the child is then raised in this isolationist paradigm, on top of also having the nervous system of somebody who's just been to war. Like, war is in my body. It's in my bones, right? So that didn't end just because the war ended. That actually is continuing, and it's going to continue to bleed through generations until you and I stop it. So I spoke about this, saying, I speak for your children who are feeling insane, who feel disconnected, who have PTSD as a repercussion of the unhealed PTSD that can turn into extreme personality disorders, or it can just be, the not connectable. Right? Like, just, you deal with your own shit, you're over there, I'm here, the individualism, the separation. And we're taught to just get over the isolation, get over that you're never going to connect in that way, and that you didn't get what you needed. And then we learn not to care for our own needs, that our needs are invalid because they weren't worthy of somebody else taking care of them. But those people were negating that they had needs that needed to be taken care of also. So they were negating their needs, and then they taught us to negate our needs. And then we felt worthless for taking up space. We felt worthless for having needs at all. It still comes up for me when I have needs that I think I shouldn't have. It's constant practice. It's hypervigilance in the opposite sense of the word. On the opposite end of the spectrum, it's like, oh, I can see. So you can have PTSD, and this is the thing, that it sucks. It's like, you have a nervous system wired for PTSD. You're very likely going to attract into your life stimulation for that nervous system that's wired for PTSD. So you're going to attract more victimization. You're going to attract more car accidents. You're going to attract things that are going to stimulate that nervous system that you have already turned on. So it's very easy then to fragment even more and have your own reasons for having PTSD on top of the, theoretical neglect that happens when you're raised by one or two people, which in my case, I was raised by two people with PTSD, that you could sit in a room with them and be completely absent, not even because of that feeling of like, okay, I can't connect anything because I'm being invalidated constantly and I'm like being projected on that I'm shitty. It's also, they're literally not there. Right? And then you as a kid go, if I was just better, maybe they'd get here. If they loved me, if I could just be better so I didn't make them leave all the time even though they're sitting right in front of me, then, then I'll know that I'm lovable. And we grow up spending our whole lives not actually feeling like we are lovable. So I just want to say today that if you are somebody who has a parent with PTSD, and just because they negate their own PTSD and think they should get over it, it doesn't negate the fact that they have PTSD. And all of us have PTSD to an extent, okay? Some of it is much more embedded and fragmented than others, but all of us have had traumatic experiences that make us split in consciousness. So if your parent was that, and they parented you from a very fragmented and hard to reach place that you're never going to get to no matter how hard you try, you're not crazy. You're not crazy. You're not crazy for being sensitive. You had a biological nervous system to begin with that was wired to be intense. And then you had people looking at you even as an infant going, that's intense. You don't need to be that intense. Get over your intensity, because they didn't know how to take care of their own needs. So they're not crazy. And neither are you, right? There's always this us against them kind of reality when we look at this. And I remember being a kid and I'd just be like, who is crazy here? I was always sure it was me. Like, they were always projecting, you're the crazy one, you're the one that needs help. And I would be like, somebody here has to be crazy, because like none of these pictures, when you put them together based on what you're saying is happening, what you're doing is happening, what I'm feeling is happening, none of them make a picture. None of it adds up. And that must mean I'm crazy, right? Or the whole system's crazy. So it was either the system's crazy or I'm crazy. And it's all, none of us are crazy. It's that we've made adaptations to our psyche to make us safe in an unsafe world. And nobody ever saw how unsafe we actually felt, because they had reasons that they believed were valid for feeling unsafe. Where you come into the world, literally your parents are likely doing 100 times better than their parents did with them, even if your parents totally suck, right? And that's the reality, is that the parenting paradigm bleeds through generations, and I'm sure it gets a little bit better each time, because each person learns like, wow, don't do that. That was shitty. Wow, that really hurt me. But they don't actually stop it, right? So you and I are here to stop it. And it starts first and foremost with honoring that you're not crazy. You're not wrong for having needs. You're not bad for being sensitive. I want to validate you, okay? In your experience of going, this is really hard, and I don't understand why it's hard for me to be in a body. I don't understand why it's hard for me to, experience life. I have people tell me they've had these quintessential childhoods that are just like, I shouldn't have any reason to feel wrong, and they feel wrong, and I want to validate you for being isolated in a world that nobody else can understand. It's no different than being in the military coming out of a cold, where like you have to have people who understand what it was like. You can't really trust people who don't really get what it was like. It's the same exact thing for people like us. Problem is, we don't really totally trust anybody, but it makes me trust people more to know that they don't trust people. Isn't that sick and scary? And it's the reality of the paradigm of growing up in isolation and an extreme, okay, you're there, but there's nothing there for me to plug into. And that stems from PTSD to begin with. So children of people with PTSD, you are highly affected by that, not just in lifestyle, in nurture, but in nature. So your traumatic experiences are going to switch your genetic experiences, and that's going to trigger your children to have different experiences, and that's been going on for eons, okay? So we're here to stop that. I want my children to no longer carry these paradigms of isolation, these paradigms of lack, these paradigms of I can't get in the body, I'm not here, it's not safe to be on the planet, right? And it starts with really owning that you're not crazy. You were born with a nervous system that was wired to be wired, right? And you were also very likely raised by that same nervous system that's like, gonna make things a little bit harder for you, and also keep you lonely while you do it. So you're not alone, and you're not crazy. You're not alone, and you're not crazy, and you are valid to be a being that was raised by somebody who didn't know what they were doing, and to just now honor that that's how you were raised. Accept that. There's no judgment there. There's no blame there. Now it's, okay, how do I raise myself and meet all of my needs? Give myself enough permission even to meet the needs that I think I shouldn't have. How do I do that? How do I raise myself? Because people who are raised by people with PTSD, often we weren't raised by them. It was lack thereof, right? We were often even cut down by them. So there's no raising up. That's something that, you and I have come to the planet with a soul contract to want to be resilient enough to be like, okay, I'm still standing, bitches, watch me rise, right? Like, we chose these parents to break chains. We're like Khaleesi, like I love her character and the resonance of her character in Game of Thrones, because we came to be that. If you're watching this right now and you understand even half of what I just said, you are Khaleesi. Okay, we came to be the breaker of the change, to stop the change and the change, actually, in all of the negative ways. We came to stop the fragmentation by first looking at it. You can't change something you can't see. And when you look at it and go, okay, I'm not crazy. I was born with a nervous system like that because maybe of PTSD. And I was raised and I attracted often traumatic experiences into my life that brought me PTSD. And you can understand it from all angles. And that doesn't make you wrong or crazy. It actually gives you a gift, because in that void that we were constantly trying to fill because we saw other people being void of themselves, in that void, we are the creators who can literally fill it with anything. But you can't fill the void until you know that you're at the bottom of the void, until you really just honor, like, okay, this is true. I don't have to make myself wrong or bad for thinking it was so bad. Or, you know, like my mom's father would beat them, put them in the hospital, like bloody constantly. And it goes far beyond that. Please read Imperfectly Sane if you're interested in it. But generationally speaking, it goes far beyond that. So her physicality with me, which was insanely intense, was, I didn't even know what it was like to get hit, right? So it was totally invalidating. And she literally did 100 times better of a job. 1,000 times better of a job at motherhood than her parents did. But what happened to her still bleeds. It bled into me. And I can let that bleed into my children. You can let that bleed into your children, or you can stop it by recognizing it and changing the light body, changing the DNA by getting back into those delta and theta wave states of relaxation where it actually is safe to be on the planet. And when you do that, you can reprogram the entire system to feel safe, because that's all you've ever been after. It's like, who's gonna help me feel safe? I don't feel safe in here. I'm all alone in here. Nobody's gonna help me feel safe. I'm not safe. And when you give your body the opportunity to get into that safety, and then program the mind at the same time with, you know, you're allowed to meet your needs. You're allowed to be in the body. You don't have to get out. You don't have to hide. You don't have to contract constantly. Nobody's here hurting you now. When you literally go back to infancy state and vibration and reprogram the mind and hold yourself as if God would hold you and look down at you and literally cradle you and look at yourself from God perspective and say, I love you. I'll never bring harm to you. I'll never let anything happen to you. And understand that you've always been cradled in that way. Always. And when you look at yourself that way, you will understand that. If you're really seeing, you're gonna feel safe to get in here. And when you get in here, that's when you can stop the pattern, because you're full. You're not, it's not just bleeding somebody else's story into your void. It's you taking the void and going, I'm coming in, bitches. And this is what this story is going to look like, okay? So you're not crazy. I want you to know that today. I hope this is helpful.